Mr. Kerner, President Trump appointed you to this position, but that's irrelevant, of course, because you're a professional committed to the rule of law and you're governed by the Hatch Act itself. I want to ask you about the Hatch Act because I've got 65,000 constituents who are federal employees. They've been told they cannot wear a button to work that says resist. They cannot talk about impeachment on the job. And the way I understand it is they can do whatever they want on their own private time in terms of electoral activity, but when they come to work, they're there to work. They're not there to campaign for or against anybody. Is that a basic intuitive understanding of the statute?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so what you found with Kellyanne Conway was that she was actually intervening in the election by making comments about specific candidates. Is that right?
And in her official capacity, yes.
She's allowed to say whatever she wants on the weekend and the evening, but as long as the American taxpayers are paying her salary, Congress has said, and the Supreme Court has affirmed this, she can't go and inject herself into political campaigns. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, but in January 2018, you started an investigation of Ms. Conway for making partisan statements strongly supporting Republican U.S. Senate candidate and accused child molester Roy Moore in the Alabama special election. You sent her interrogatories to get her side of the story, why she should be able to intervene in that campaign using her official capacity. And what did she say in response to that?
We received no response.
She never responded?
She did not respond.
Okay, you sent President Trump a report finding that Ms. Conway's media advocacy for Roy Moore violated the Hatch Act. Did you give her an opportunity to respond to that report before you released it?
Yes, we did.
And did she respond?
She did not.
Did President Trump respond in any way to discipline this employee when tens of thousands of my employees have been told they can't even wear a button to work that says resist, which is a word in the English language, right? Did President Trump respond to you?
We did not get a response, no.
Okay, in December of last year, you sent Ms. Conway a letter explaining she could not use the same Twitter account for official government business and then use it to disparage Democratic Republicans and support Republican candidates like her beloved Roy Moore in Alabama. That letter gave Ms. Conway simple recommendations to come into compliance with the law, to say, here's how you separate what's your official business that you're paid for by the American people and your partisan political activity. How did she respond to that letter?
We received no response.
Okay, so for 18 months, you've engaged in perhaps 8, 10, 12 different attempts to get her to respond. Did she ever once respond to you?
She did not. I do want to clarify one thing. We did have conversations with the White House counsel's office. So there were some, so on her behalf, if you will, so there were some back and forth in that regard, but we never heard from her directly.
Ms. Conway seemed to ridicule the enforcement of the Hatch Act, as the chairman stated. On one occasion, she had the audacity to mockingly ask, let me know when the jail sentence starts. What message does that send to my constituents who are governed by the Hatch Act? And what message does it send to those postal workers who've been disciplined for violating the Hatch Act?
I thought those comments were very unfortunate.
Does it send the message that there's one standard that applies to people who are in President Trump's favor and a different standard that applies to millions of federal employees who are subject to the requirements of the Hatch Act?
I think it sent the wrong message. It sent the message that the Hatch Act was not going to be evenly applied.
Now look, we've heard some murmurings about freedom of speech from the other side of the aisle, which is unusual. So I want to pounce on the moment to say that's great that people are talking about freedom of speech. The Hatch Act has been twice challenged in the Supreme Court by unions for working people saying we should be able to express ourselves politically at work. And generally our colleagues say, no, that's not the case. We want a straitjacket on your political speech at work. But the Supreme Court has upheld the Hatch Act. When you discipline employees, do you allow constitutional arguments to take place? Can people make a free speech argument before?
Sure. When we take a case to the MSPB, they can make whatever argument they would like. It's just like a regular proceeding.
All right. And we just haven't heard anything from Ms. Conway about why the line should be drawn differently from her than it's been drawn for everybody else. You know, I've got to say, her contemptuous defiance of your board and you as the director of it is unacceptable and intolerable. Her contemptuous defiance of this committee is unacceptable, and I hope we're going to render this subpoena quickly. And I just want to say the message should go out to all of the employees in the White House. If you act in contempt of the American people in Congress, we will find you in contempt of the American people and of Congress. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Miller.